And welcome on back, y'all. We're here once again with another Pokemon Pocket video for you all. It's your boy Ben here, and I'm excited to dive into the meta because things are still being figured out, and I love it. Where before it felt like the meta may have been solved, but this weekend is showing that it's not just quite there yet. So we have here's just kind of the meta game overall, and then we're gonna dive into three big tournaments that quite frankly is over 2,000 players signed up for it. So let's go ahead and dive in. Before we go into that, y'all, definitely hit that like button, subscribe, click that notification bell button. We're trying to hit 10,000 subscribers before we hit June, and with your help I know that we can make it there. All right, y'all, with that stuff out of the way, let's go ahead and get into it. So like I said, in the combination of this tournament, and this tournament as well, awesome, shout out to the $1,000 plus prizing value. We've seen over 2,000 players, so getting a good wrap of what these decks are, so that way you all can take them, especially in the fact that we're doing these 5-win events. And so definitely grab these if you're looking for something to go. So for our first deck that we're going to talk through, this one won the Hooglandia and Spraggles Open. They took first place here, and this is a Manaphy Origin Form Palkia EX deck. Now this deck, after watching the tournament myself live and everything else like that, this deck is really strong. Okay, so the whole main point of this, right, is that you want to start on your Manaphy, you're powering up your Origin Form Palkia and your Palkia EX, and what you do after that is that you go into your Origin Form. So this deck is really making you still go through 3 Pokemon. That is your Manaphy, that is your Origin Form, and then that is your Palkia. The cool thing about this is that in those decks where you were playing Baby Articuno, you can really swap out for our Origin Form Palkia, because hitting a heads here on OF Palkia means that you're dealing 120 damage. So into those decks like Dialga and Arceus, like this deck had to face against, hitting 60 and then into 120, or even just hitting that 120 first, stops what they're doing, because you're clearing things in 2. Right? And even getting 2 tails in a row, that's 120 damage. That's still a lot of pressure, considering that this mon is only worth 1 point. You still have things like your Misty to get yourself up there quicker. You have now Irida in the game, so that way you can heal these things. Having a giant cape here is super helpful to beat breakpoints here. A giant cape forces this Arceus for this one to have a Giovanni in order to clear it, and obviously with Palkia EX 170, that's still a lot of HP from there. So yeah, y'all, this is a really strong one to start off with. Okay, so the next deck we're going to cover is the Rampardos Lucario, featuring some Sudowoodo and Marshadow Love here. This deck is being crowned technically right now as the anti-meta, but I'll also say that Palkia deck that we just saw also goes into the top deck. And we're gonna put this in quotes because now there's more and more decks that are coming out to fight it, and we'll talk about that next deck in a little bit here. But this deck is super sweet, because this deck, what this is really cool on, is that there's not a lot of energy, and you're able to hit hard and hit hard fast, right? So your Sudowoodo can deal up to 50 damage if it's an EX. If you have your Lucario out, you are hitting 70 damage. That's a lot. Your Marshadow here is hitting 100 or 120 damage. That's a lot. If they're going into the Dialga Arceus has a fighting weakness, so these things clear it. With just one Lucario, Rampardos is hitting for 150 damage, so that's really great here. They're running 2 Pokemon communications to find their stage 1 and obviously their stage 2s here. And you have your Sabrina and you have your Cyrus in case they're trying to run, especially if you're softening things up with Sudowoodo in the beginning. Getting that Cyrus to confirm your game is really strong here. This deck is really has shown it went 10-0 in the first day of the Ursi Day tournament, literally a perfect run. So this deck is really strong. having your options, especially with this Lucario boosting up here. We're really starting to see this come up on top in terms of the fighting decks, and really making people worried about like what they can do. But it's also nice to see that like while this is really positioned into Arceus EX, we'll see if they'll make any kind of pivots or changes to other decks that are coming up, like the Palkia deck that we just saw. Now we can't talk about top and best decks without talking about the Dialga Arceus EX deck. That's also what's coming up next here, and there's a lot of different variations that are running here. Like I'm going to show you, like these are like, this is one base where this is like typically being seen here. You have your Dialga, you have your Arceus EX, you have your Mew, and then you have the Healing Shaman. There are variations that run the Sky Shaman instead, so that way you can pivot more easily while keeping the energy together. You have variations where it's just Dialga, just Arceus, and just the shamans, like one of each. I kind of like this one because it gives you different opportunities. The Mew here plays really well against Palkia, plays really well against heavy hitters, and even sometimes when you're going against like a lone Celebi or things like that, being able to genome hacking and getting more and more energy from Dialga means that you're in a good slot there. So to say that there's different variations, even seeing this one being creative here, including the Skarmory is really big, because being able to attack for 50 clears things like the Manaphy's that we saw, puts things on the back pedal of like those Lucarios or Riolus and like things like that. So it's a really good 1-2 punch here with the Skarmory here. But this is more common that you'll see, and of course I would say if you were to start anywhere, start with this core. I like all of these pieces. Dialga to give your 2 energy to your Arceus or to your Mew, play out there. You have tons of bench Pokemon out. One of the things to note here is when you're piloting this deck is that like you really don't drop anything on your bench until you're ready to ramp up a Dialga. The last thing that you would want is having your bench already filled all the way out, and then they hit you with a Sabrina, and then like you've now lost momentum or have to use a leaf when you don't need to, and things like that. So having playing it around this style, especially where there's no Sky Shamans, keeping these close to your chest while you're waiting for your Metallic Turbo to go feels really good. Also, another thing to note about this deck is that like you are more favored to win when you go second, and like, you know, going first, going second, like this is a deck that prefers to go second. And the last thing that I'll say about this deck is I don't know about this Mars. I don't know about this Mars. Maybe I get a second version. Maybe I get a second Cyrus. Maybe I get a second Sabrina. Maybe I throw a Rocky Helmet on here. Literally any other card feels really good. I mean, I think like the only time that you ever play Mars is when you like knock one at, like they get one of these knocked out here. But even then, Mars may be good, but I feel like it's too situational, and I've just seen too many times of Mars being played and the opponent drawing the same card, and like being able to watch these tournaments and see that happen in real time literally blows my mind. Up next we have a Gallade EX deck, which is like really cool to like see these mons shine. I think one of the really cool things that's here for it is like Gallade has 170 HP, which is awesome. You also have the ability of being a fighting deck, and so you get use of like Hitmonlee, which deals that damage to that back, softening things up for Gallade if they're higher HP. Things like Palkia that like discards their energy, like if you get to soften them up with Hitmonlee, that won't be a problem for your EX setup. You have Sudowoodo to also deal that extra damage to those EX mons in the beginning. We're seeing a lot of basic EX mons playing out, so Sudowoodo is very good position in this meta right now. And Gallade EX, 70 damage baseline, and you do 20 more for each energy that is attached to your opponent's active Pokemon, so you can really climb up there when you get this together. Another cool thing that I like about this deck is that like your only stage 1s and stage 2s is focused mainly on the Gallade EX lines, while these are just your basics. So obviously you're gonna draw a basic, you have Pokeballs to draw more basics, and then so when you're like looking for, you know, later on in the game for Pokemon communications, that kind of like keeps these consistent, since your Pokeballs will take some of these out of the way. And so that's really cool. The deck has Rocky Helmet here, opting for that since this has such high health. You can also like use it for these guys to help dissuade your opponent, dissuade them from attacking them. And then there's Cyrus here. The Rocky Helmet helps you enable that, and obviously so does the Hitmonlee. Up next, we have an Arceus EX featuring Greninja and Heatran with Judgedon. Judgedon. Okay, so this is a fire water energy deck, which is like pretty sweet. I really think that like Heatran is probably one of the best cards to like combo out with Arceus EX. I really love the fact that it's free retreat. I love the fact that you can hit for 40 damage, make the opponent think about like wanting to attack, because then you're now attacking for 80. It has 110 HP. It's doing really well. And so like I like that. And then you have your Greninja lines, which pairs up really well with your Cyrus, softening things up so that way they get cleared for 130 from the Arceus is really good here. And Greninja has been a long time staple since the game came out. Really, there hasn't been a meta game where Greninja isn't good, and it finding a home in an Arceus EX deck is pretty sweet. And one of the cool things to note is that since this is running a fire and water energy, your Judgedon now can attack. So if you're looking to get things set up here and your opponent is avoiding this Judgedon, you can start putting energy on here, and like now it's kind of scary. Now we want to clear it because we don't want to get for 90 damage, right? So like setting these guys up down here, getting them ready to go, and if they leave room for your Judgedon to attack as well, totally fine. That works out, being able to deal 90, and you're not mad at that damage either. Speaking of Arceus EX decks, we have another version of the Crobat here, and this one is opting to playing Judgedon here. This deck is really strong in the sense that it's giving you time to build things up, and what you do here when you're really thinking about like how you want to attack is you have your Judgedon up front. So this is a -20 to your opponent's active spot. You have Darkrai EX, which is another -20 because of Nightmare Aura. You then also have your Crobat, which is a -30 due to its Cunning Link ability once Arceus is out. So you really want to have Judgedon in your active spot, and then these three onto your bench to go from there. And then if you can't have this, or you have one of these, that just tells you where to power up as well. And if they're getting really soft, then you can start leaning towards this. But through this damage, the 80 is more than enough. And you're really using your Arceus EX kind of as like your fail-proof, your break this emergency glass kind of option, because in order to even get to that back line, they have to go through so much. And of course the Judgedon kind of still feels like one of those best tank line mons that's currently out there right now, that really helps you build this consistency of having your stage 2 lines. So Judgedon really does give you more than enough time to do that. And then by having this giant cape here, just even living 120, giving yourself a different break point when it comes to how much your opponent is attacking you is huge. And then so that's really helpful here to have that, and also helpful for your Arceus to like live a dimensional storm, or your Darkrai to like live a dimensional storm. Up next, we have an 18 trainer style deck, and this is interesting because this is the Palkia EX version. Last week and even leading up to this weekend, it really seemed like Articuno EX was the premier 18 trainer deck, especially because of the inclusion with Irida. We saw last meta or last set that Pachirisu EX was like new shiny toy, but also was providing more results there. You had all the tools that was helpful for it, and you were able to attack faster, which like wasn't really the case with Articuno unless you flipped your Misty Heads, and because it was a consistent damage that you're attacking quickly, you kind of ended things quickly. Now, to flip that with the Irida, that kind of put the Articuno EX up back on the line. However, I think what's really cool here with this Palkia EX is that once you hit the Misty and you hit the 150, no matter what card is in front of you, you are clearing. Like that 150 damage clears through any first turn thing in this game currently, unless your opponent like if you're going first, you both have to set something up. No, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, but there is no basic EX that is more than 150. And so if you get your Misty and it clears up, you're good to go. Or if they go first and then you get to go second and you just flip 3, you're good to go. But another thing to like think about too is that like you get to attack for just 1 energy, so you're already attacking. That 30 does well, and so it's pretty good. It's stationed pretty well, and the Palkia EX has outshined its counterpart in all 3 tournaments by like a wide margin. The Articuno EXs were in the 40%, where Palkia EX was actually uplifted into the 50%. So it was really cool to see this kind of deck just kind of like rise up and really kind of give people more of a competitive edge here to do that with. But again, you know, like a free Misty, like you just sometimes get by just flipping heads on Misty, and like that is enough. So like I'm worried about ranked, but you know, right now that's neither here or there. Up next, we have a Gyarados EX deck, which is like really interesting here because this build that is doing really well. Typically, you see Gyarados EX, you see Greninja, you see Judgedon, and like you just kind of like that's kind of like the room and that takes up everything. But what they're deciding to do here is that like we're going all in on Gyarados EX, and because you have to go through Rocky Helmet, and because you have to go through your Judgedon, and like maybe like the Kangaskhan with the Rocky Helmet and the extra early damage, Gyarados' 140 is going to be enough to clear everything else out. The more popular mons that are being used right now are CSEX. Darkrai is still very popular in there. We're starting to see a little bit of Palkia, but Palkia loses that health right through this Judgedon and through the Rocky Helmet. This 140 is in a very good spot because of the mons that are in this deck. So Gyarados still is in slot to one-shot a lot of things, and this like energy discard that could be on the opponent's side really can be disruptive. It says random, but you know, you and I both know that random just means the worst possible option for me when I go against them, and the best possible option for them when my opponent is playing it. So this deck is very interesting. They're now allowed to play a lot more trainers in here, a lot more different things like the Rocky Helmets in here by taking out the Greninja line. And I thought this deck was a really cool spin of what the Gyarados EX could be, and especially if you decide to like go all in on it. And just for reference, as we were like talking about that, like here is what it looks like with the Greninja line. You have 6 cards here, and so you lose things out on a Kangaskhan, you lose things out on a Sabrina, you lose things out on Rocky Helmet that's provided for you, and you lose out on healing, right? Like this variation of it allows you to do that, and so that's really cool, and I kind of like this. So I'm excited to try this out myself. And the last deck here really like signifies if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Our Darkrai EX Magnezone deck is still very strong into this meta. You're opting to go with Kangaskhan here because one energy for 60 damage can be really good. 1 energy for 30 damage is still very good. 1 energy for 0 damage is not good, but at the end of the day, it just needs 1, and then you get to power it up. Then you get to still attack here with 20 per turn through your Darkrai EX. So at certain points, they're always getting hit with some kind of damage. Your Magnezone being able to self charge up here through the Magneton, it will always still remain powerful, and allowing Magnezone to be the most flexible card that we have to like be able to really play in any kind of deck or any kind of style that you would like to. And the inclusion of Rocky Helmet, Giant Cape in here to really play around with that. You get your assortments of trainers here, your Cyrus, your Leaf to bring back the Kangaskhan, the Sabrina. So like this deck is very solid. You can make little tweaks for there, but like the core of these cards here feel really strong, feel really good together. And so like while there are certain things that like continue to stay over, it's also really refreshing to see new style of decks. Like, let me see, like this one. Once again, this deck was not seen before, like really around before this tournament. And this is something that like won a tournament this weekend. Like I said, like the Hooling and Leo one. So this is really awesome. So this was a great meta report. It's really fun to nerd out about like all these decks and everything else that we see. Let me know down below in the comment section which was your favorite deck that was featured, and let me know if you're gonna be trying any of these in your 5-win event. As always, y'all, if you enjoyed the content, let me know by hitting that like button, subscribing, and definitely clicking that notification bell button. And until the next one, y'all, peace.